What's up, true believers? Welcome to Greg's Comic Book Club, issue number 8. I, of course, am Greg, and today in the club, it's Gary Whitta.
Hello.
How are you, sir?
I'm excited. I'm a little bit nervous, though, because Kind of Funny Games Daily,
Yeah, your bread
I
and
know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
This, however, is my first time doing the comic book club. So
Sure.
This is, as soon as you said true believers instead of what's up everybody.
Oh,
I'm
man,
like,
it's a different
we're in
show
uncharted
here.
territory.
Oh, my God,
here.
you don't even know what's happening.
I know, but I know I'm in good hands, and I like comics, so I'm excited to be here.
Well, honestly, this is one of my favorite shows to do because I feel this is the most laid-back podcast we do.
How often do you do this one?
We do it monthly.
Okay.
This is a show, of course, you guys know, and if you don't, maybe I've put this up on a free comic book day or something to that effect, or it's your first one. Basically, Greg's Comic Book Club goes up each and every month. The first Wednesday of every month, I'll get to that in one second, on patreon.com/kindafunny. This is your reward, your exclusive show. This goes out live nowhere else, just up on patreon.com/kindafunny for dollar supporters and above. If you want to go the extra mile, you can support us at the $15 level, be part of the review crew, put in questions, all that jazz. But just for supporting us at the dollar level, we put the show up exclusively there. So once in a while, so far there's been, I think, 2 free comic book days. I've put out 2 issues for free. Like, hey, you want to see what the show's like? Here you go. But otherwise, only for Patreon stuff. So people who are here, they know what's happening. It's the same cast of characters all the time, talking about comics, having fun. But that's it.
I love it.
Well,
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
it's a pleasure. You've been, much requested, obviously, ever since you and I almost came to blows about Superman.
I know that Superman thing is going to haunt
But I
us
feel
forever.
like it's blown over for the most part. You agreed that I'm right. Superman's more American than Kryptonian. Everybody's happy.
I'm glad that I was finally able to make my argument as to why I felt that. I always felt that you had contrary positions in this, and that you felt that Superman is more of Earth than of Krypton.
Yeah.
And that Jonathan Kent is more his father than Jor-El is.
Correct.
But then you also said that you don't like the Superman movie, and the original Richard Donner Superman movie makes your argument probably better than any other piece of Superman
What
lore.
I've said, don't try to misquote me here, sir. It's not that I don't like the original Superman movie. I think the original, the Christopher Reeve 1976 Superman just did a lot of damage
You
to
said
the
it
character.
ruined Superman.
It ruined Superman for a generation.
And
People
how
think
did
he's
it
too
do that?
powerful. He's too powerful. He's a god.
Because
Nothing
he
can hurt
spins
him.
the world around?
He can rewind time.
I think
Whole bunch of garbage.
it's interesting, isn't it, how sometimes when you love a movie so much, or a particular story, it could be a comic book, but in this case it's a movie.
Sure.
You love something so much that you will let sometimes very big things go.
Oh, yeah.
Because you don't want it to spoil it.
Yeah.
When Superman travels so fast that he starts, I believe that Superman could travel so fast that he could reverse the
believe
rotation of the Earth. Yeah. But we all know that wouldn't actually reverse the flow of time.
Somebody has to have done a cartoon, right, where he does it and it's just oceans rocking all around,
now
people
he's
flying off.
just wrecked the Earth way
everything's
more.
done. Yeah.
I'm sure that there's some kind of YouTube video or something saying, here's what would happen if Superman actually sent the Earth spinning on, contrary to its axis.
Yeah.
But yeah, so even though as absurd as that is, when the rocks start kind of climbing back up the Hoover Dam, it's cool. But you also go, it's an interesting study in how audiences react to things. That's at the very end of the movie.
Yeah.
And the movie has by that point earned so much goodwill.
Yeah.
Because Christopher Reeve is such a perfect
my
Superman,
God.
and
Are
Gene
you kidding
Hackman
me?
is such a perfect Lex Luthor.
Margot Kidder,
Margot is such a perfect Lois Lane. That so much great stuff has happened.
Yeah.
That when it pulls something as ridiculous as that, you kind of let it go. It doesn't ruin the movie for you, even though on paper it should.
When I give it shit and I say it ruins Superman for a generation, understandably, it made him Superman for so many people, right? It established the character and did so much good for comics and for Superman. The issue is, right, I feel that back then, and since then, really, for a long, long time, you got so few and far between comic movies, let alone Superman movies, that it just became everybody, oh, well, he sucks, he's too powerful. Whereas now you could do it, like, whatever they do in Spider-Man Homecoming, great. You've had 2 other versions of Spider-Man, and then on top of that, you're getting into the Spider-Verse, and there's a million cartoons. Like, people understand nowadays that's a different interpretation. There's a different universe.
Well, let me ask you this, because I'm interested to learn more about it, and I think you are more of a scholar. I'm an enthusiast, but I think you're more of a scholar, and you probably know this better than I do.
This is where you always you pin me down to make me look like an
so let
idiot.
me ask you this. At the point at which the Superman movie was made in 1978, where was Superman...
I said 76, so you're already a better scholar than me. You're right.
Where was Superman in the comic books in terms of... Are you saying that the movie ratcheted up his power level way beyond anything that had been represented in the comics?
No, that was very much what his power level was.
Okay, so how did the movie ruin anything if it just kept, if it was in line with the comics?
Because not too long after that, we get Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Okay.
Where they go through and they basically they eliminate the old Silver Age Superman that could spin the world, be invulnerable, do all these different things, and reset it to there's one Superman, and he's not weak by any means, but he does have limitations.
Right.
And that, for comic book fans, I feel like if you read that, and that's where I start reading. That's the Superman I know. I'm like, oh, this guy has limitations, he has weaknesses, he has problems that are going to get, you know what I mean? Like, whereas I feel like, think about it this way, right? Like, the success of the MCU and even DCEU, right? That isn't translated to comics shops being rocked by new customers. They get some, but not many. Many people consume superheroes and pop culture comics that way without ever reading source material. So it was, I feel, a generation of people watch these Superman movies and like, oh, I know Superman now. Can reverse time, total alien. He's gonna bang Lois and then not tell he's Clark Kent, and like, you know what I mean? Like all these, like, oh no, that's not at all what he is now to me, and all these different things. But
why do you think Superman has been so successful over the years, and he's as popular now as he's ever been?
Yeah.
Even though he's constantly dogged by this argument that people make constantly, which is, well, he's boring because he's too powerful.
Sure.
That doesn't seem to have affected his popularity and the ability to keep telling stories about Superman.
Yeah, but I feel like Batman's more popular than Superman. Right?
How so?
Literally, just period. Like, Batman is more popular in terms of YouTube
I thought you
searches.
said more powerful. Sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Popular. I think it has hindered him in terms of people being able to relate to him. It's the same where I would argue that probably Spider-Man's more and I'm not going off Google Trends here, just off of like ballpark opinions of a Comic-Con or talking to a fan, right? I feel like Spider-Man as the everyman is more popular than Superman. I think the reason Superman transcends and the reason people still have a soft spot for him and the people still love him, of course, he was first. Secondly, he's one when you're a kid and you don't care about storytelling and you just want to see him lift heavy shit and you want to see him save the day and grab Lois and you've got me, who's got you? You want those moments, right? And then on top of that, I think if you are somebody like me then who wants to get really into the mythos and wants to get into really why we like Superman, it's the idea that what do they teach you in school when you're in, political classes and talking about history, right? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Superman has absolute power, but chooses not to use it. He chooses to live as a human, to be a reporter, to try to be a family man.
Superman doesn't get enough credit for all the things he doesn't do, but could. And again, we saw it in Superman 3. Right. When nicotine kryptonite Superman goes bad. Yeah. The sad reality is that's the Superman most of us would be. We'd be dicks.
I mean, like, did you play the video game Injustice or read the Injustice comics?
No.
Great. The comics, Tom Taylor put him on the map with good reason. He's an amazing comic book writer. But basically, they gave him the shitty video game tie-in. I'm putting quotes around it. Like, hey, nobody cares about video game tie-ins. Write a book. And he's spun it off to be as successful in comics as the video game has been in that, because the story's so good, right? Do you know the story of Injustice?
No, I mean, I'm curious why you mentioned it off the back of the Dick Superman comment that I made. Because is Superman a dick in this as well?
What happens in Injustice is that the Joker tricks Superman into killing Lois, and then the Joker nukes Metropolis. So Superman kills Lois Lane thinking it's Doomsday, and then Metropolis gets nuked, right?
Right.
So Superman comes back in while Batman's like interrogating Joker or whatever, and just tears open the wall and walks up, and Bruce knows it's out of control, and he's like, you can't do this. You can't give him what he wants. And Superman just fucking stabs him right through the chest and kills the Joker in cold blood right there, right? And Bruce is like, I have to take you down now. And he's like, you can't. And basically Superman is like, I'm done with this. I'm in charge now. And he becomes like ruler of the world.
Which is a decision he can make at any time.
Of course.
That's again, I didn't like the movies, but that's the fear that Bruce Wayne has in Batman v Superman, right?
Sure. And I think it's such a, when Lex is done right, it's such a great motivator, of course. Yeah, right? Of like, yes, it's what people feel about Google. Yeah, Google's doing great things right now. What about when they're the only game in town? When there is no one there to stand up and fight them, we all think they're great.
Do you ever read a comic called The Nail, Superman comic?
The Nail?
The Nail.
And it's a Superman comic?
Yeah.
Give me the synopsis.
So there's a well-known parable. For the one of a nail, the horseshoe was lost. For the one of the horseshoe, the horse was lost. For the one of the horse, the battalion was lost. For the one of the battalion, the battle was lost. For the one of the battle, the war was lost. And all for the one of a nail.
Sure.
So it's basically a little parable about how tiny things can lead to having great consequences.
Exactly. Butterfly effect.
So in the Nail, posits the idea that on the way
to the Kents,
Martha and Jonathan Kent get a flat tire, and they never find Clark. Yeah. They never find Kal-El, and then so you zap forward and you realize, and it basically posits a world. What might Superman have turned out like had he never been raised by the Kents?
Right. Yeah. If he doesn't have that moral compass.
And it's fascinating. And Red Sun for that reason is also fascinating. All the different alternate versions of Superman I find really interesting for that reason.
Well, I mean, that's what I love, and that's why I think Injustice works so well, and why comics can work so well when it is all right, cool. It's today I'm going to talk about Captain America 695, right? Like,
my goodness,
a bit ridiculous, right? Like, let's Tell your own we know the basics. I love it when they say, here's, like they did to Tom Taylor, here's a toy box of the DC universe. What story do you want to tell, right? And he gets to go, oh, well, I think it'd be cool if this happened and Barbara Gordon, and like, you know what I mean? You go off and spin it off and you just make your own thing. You don't have to worry about continuity so much.
Speaking of Captain America, I'm going to show my ignorance here. The last time I checked in on the Captain America universe, there was a big to-do about him secretly being Hydra.
Yeah, exactly.
How did that get resolved? Was it all a ruse?
So... That was, well, yeah, of course it was. Okay. I mean, it wasn't real Captain America. That was an evil Captain America taking his place or whatever. Real Captain America came back and beat his ass.
Isn't this the reason why comics often piss us off?
Sure.
Because we always like anytime a character dies and they make a big event out of it, the death of Superman, the death of Peter Parker, Captain America's Hydra, you don't really go, oh my God, what do the consequences of this mean? Or your mind goes straight to, well, how is this going to turn out to be a fake out? Because it always is. Yeah. So we never really feel the consequences of those major decisions because we know they're all bogus.
We always want our cake and eat it too. It's that situation where it is that I'll sit here and say how much I don't like continuity in certain aspects of it. And then I'll also be like, man, I miss the times when I was growing up reading comics in the 90s and there was consequences. Like, I remember when the old adage was the only people who stayed dead are Bucky and Jason Todd. And of course, they both brought those people back. But I mean, like, that was a time where, Hal Jordan went crazy and killed all the other Green Lanterns and became Parallax and Kyle Rayner. And it's like, you had this rich, awesome universe, but the problem then is that you really do put up walls to trying to get new people in. And comics are so obsessed with trying to get new readers in that they do it at the behest of, well, fuck it, blow up continuity, bring back Tony Stark, whatever.
Is there a major character in major comics history who has been definitively killed and is never coming back?
I mean, no, that's impossible.
No.
But, Bucky and Jason were the people who were.
Did you see the most recent one that I checked in on? Remind me again, because I'm not an expert. What's the name of Wolverine's son?
His son?
Yeah, Wolverine has a son who's a dick, and he has the adamantium and the claws and everything. Yeah. I can't remember the name of him.
Is it a clone or is it a son?
It's either a clone or it's son.
The guy who's fighting Iceman all the time and then showed up in all new Wolverine. I know all new Wolverine, and I want to say it has a K in it. Is it?
He kills Frank Castle.
Okay.
He goes up against Frank Castle.
Yeah.
And kills him.
Okay.
And again, then there's an image of him. I think he literally like rips Frank Castle's head off.
Oh Jesus!
See if you can find the name of Wolverine's son. You gotta, as soon as it's one of those things. As soon as you say, I'm going, oh yes, of course.
Yeah.
How could I have forgotten? Because I remember because I used to play against him in Marvel Puzzle Quest.
Daken.
He popped up. Daken.
Yeah.
Daken or Daken.
Yeah, this is the guy who shows up in Iceman that I was talking about.
He's a dick. So Daken and Frank Castle go at it.
Yeah.
And Daken straight up murders Frank Castle.
Yeah.
And now you're thinking, okay, well, this is tricky because he doesn't have, I get it. Superman, they chuck him in some kind of Krypton, regeneration chamber or whatever.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It was an evil version.
He was a solar battery, yeah.
Frank Castle is just a dude with a bunch of guns.
Yeah.
So it's hard to imagine how when you just murder, literally rip the head off of a mortal human.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now what? I got to see how you do this. Frankencastle. That's where they went with it.
Really?
They Frankenstein.
I'm not a Marvel guy.
Like a mad scientist. Do you have a you're wrong on this? Because it must be blowing up right now. Because I'm sure I got this wrong. Live. As I recall, this
is the best part of comics when you talk about what you remember.
So, as I remember it, some kind of mad scientist stitched him back together.
Yeah.
And he came back as Frankencastle. And yet we still read comics all the time.
It's what do you want? You know what I mean? Like, it's so upsetting of trying to push and pull, and how do you make something relevant but keep it open to people, and how do you do this, and and that's why you get excited when Bendis comes onto the Superman books, or another creator you love picks up something that is established, and it's like, oh, I can't wait to see what they do with it.
Right.
But again, I'm still so much of the mindset of like, cool, it doesn't need to be Captain America 695 Action Comics or 1001. Like, let them be their own thing, so they're not trying to
they do that, right? They have these different spin-off universes.
Well, yeah, but I mean, for the most part, it is all right. I'm picking up Superman's story, but I do have to reference the fact that this shit happened before them, right?
All
right, Batgirl of Burnside was great, but now we're doing this, so we have to slowly transition out of it to get her back to Gotham and doing whatever she's gonna do. Whatever, just tell your stories.
Do you ever feel insulted by comics? Like when they do something, so like if you come across a Frankencastle type thing, I guess it all depends on the execution. But have you ever reached what you might feel is like a tipping point and you want to throw the comic across the room kind of moment where you're like, man, fuck this comic.
Of course, for me it was Spider-Man Clone Saga. Did you ever read this back in the 90s?
There?
This is the one where there had been and I'm gonna get all this wrong. But when I was
But again,
a kid,
your version of it is
reading
the fun. That's the one I
Spider-Man in
wanna
the
hear.
90s, right? I want to say in the 80s, maybe even the 70s, there was a storyline where they cloned Spider-Man, right? And Spider-Man beat the guy and like threw him into a smokestack.
Did
or
they
some
make
shit
just
like that.
one clone of him? Or
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they get loose with that, obviously, and retconning and everything else. But eventually, in the 90s, when I'm reading, he's married to Mary Jane. He has a great life, or, he has a Parker life. But he's doing his thing, and eventually this other Peter Parker shows up. And I think he was already swinging around as the Scarlet Spider, or that's what happens after the fact. But it's a cool blue suit. Everybody loves it from the new Spider-Man game. Doesn't matter. There's a Scarlet Spider out there. They have this conversation. They start trying to, they fight a little bit, then they figure it out. And they go through and they do this mad scientist thing. And they basically come down to the decision that the Peter Parker, who was married to MJ, who has been living this life forever, actually is the clone. And the guy we thought was the clone is the original Peter Parker.
Does that make sense?
Sure, it's comics. Why not? You know what I mean? Because in the beginning they had the same memories, so it is that like, wait, who are you? That kind of moment.
Right.
And so what happens is, and this is how as I remember it, my Spider-Man, my Peter Parker is basically like, fuck, dude, I'm gonna change my name to Ben Reilly. I'm gonna go off and be Scarlet Spider, yada yada. And then new Spider-Man's like, well, I can't just walk into this life with MJ. And it was like, I was like, fuck this. Like, this is a bridge too far for you to totally do this. Not to mention it wouldn't make any sense if tomorrow Greg Miller from college shows up and is like, I'm the real Greg Miller. We prove it's real Greg Miller. I wouldn't be like to Jen, well, sorry, this has all been a lie. I got to go on on my own journey.
They did this quite brilliantly. I don't want to take this off the comics.
This is fine.
Comics
Gary.
rail. But do you remember Tom Riker? Oh, no, you don't watch Star Trek, do you? So they found a ship that had been crashed for many years, and it was considered lost. By the Federation had written it off, like Starfleet had given up the search for it years ago. They found the wreck of it. The Enterprise finds the wreck.
Yeah.
And they go aboard. Obviously, everyone's dead. It's been lost for, I think, like 15 years, something like that. It's been considered gone. And they find it, and it's beat up. It's in bad shape, but they beam aboard. They look around. They get the power back up. There's something trapped in the transporter buffer, and they pull it out, and it's Riker. It was from Riker's first assignment when it was his first ship like 15 years ago, stuck in the transporter buffer for all these years. And when they pull it out, there's essentially now two Rikers.
Oh, wow.
Each of whom have a legitimate claim
to be Riker.
to be around, to be Will Riker. They both are.
Yeah.
And this is one of the problems when you get into these problems with Star Trek and transporter technology and all kinds of weird paradoxical stuff shows up.
Because there's been these arguments, right, that every time you beam, you're just making a copy of
you
yourself.
essentially photocopy yourself.
Yeah.
And that photocopy gets stuck in the paper tray, essentially. And when it finally gets spat out, he is legitimately as much Riker as the one that didn't get caught in the transporter accident was. And so there's a bit of an argument over, well, now what do we do? We can't have two Will Rikers running around, but they both have a legitimate claim to be a Will. Anyway, the other Will Riker ends up turning out to he calls himself Tom Riker, and just goes off and has another life.
Okay,
but it's weird. There is another person out there.
It's like a cool storyline, but then when it totally like fucks everything up in a weird way, right? And it was the same thing too. I wasn't even reading Spider-Man because like it really did burn me for Spider-Man for a long time. But in college, I'd go to the bookstore at Mizzou and just read comics off the shelf and put them down, not buy them because I was broke. But eventually, when they did, do you remember when they did One More Day into Brand New Day?
No.
Where they were like, all right, so this is.
Which comic was this?
Spider-Man.
Okay,
this is Spider-Man storyline. So in the Marvel Comics version of Civil War, right? Like Spider-Man joins with Tony, and basically they're like, we have to register. And so Spider-Man, in a show of solidarity during a press conference, comes down on the string, walks over.
Oh, is this when he reveals himself? Oh yeah,
Peter Parker,
I remember that moment.
I've been Spider-Man since I was 16. Fucking amazing moment that does paradigm shift everything, right? Like he moves Aunt May and MJ into Avengers Tower because
now the whole point is that
exactly
the whole reason why he has the identity
Yeah.
is to protect the people he loves.
And so as it goes on, they're getting ready to. They want to, they want to reboot. Civil War's done. We need to go do some things. How do we get Spider-Man out of this situation and reset everything? Their brilliant idea is Aunt May gets shot. Somebody tries to take a shot at Peter. He gets out of the way, but Aunt May gets shot. Aunt May's on her deathbed. And I always fuck this up because I'm not the Marvel Comics guy, but Mephisto, whatever. The devil that's not the devil, but he's the devil.
Okay.
He shows up and he's basically like, hey, I'll save her life, but if you want that, you have to give up love for love. So he's like, if you want to, fine, but you've got to give up your relationship with Mary Jane. Like, you'll sign this thing, and you'll have one final day together, and then you're both going to wake up. Aunt May will be alive, she'll be alive, you'll be alive,
but you can never see her
you'll
again.
You'll have no relationship together. That one exact. And Peter says yes.
And he's doing that just to fuck with him, just to be a dick?
No, to do this, to reset the universe the way they want it. And I never read the entire, echelon of continuing on, but it was just like, that's the best we could do to save your 90-year-old aunt who's gonna die anyway. Like, what are you thinking, Peter?
You got a whole life with this woman.
But the universe, the creators are like, that's what we're gonna do, and that's what they did, and they did it, and then it started Brand New Day where they had again, I'm not reading it actively at the time, but they had dated, but it didn't work out, and so it never happened, and they were more friends or anything. She was in the universe still, but then like they heard people bitching like that, so they gave us an offshoot called Renew Your Vows, which was parallel universe or whatever, where if they had stayed together and they had this kid and they were all and I was like, that's awesome, that's great. And now Amazing Spider-Man by Spencer and Otley, like MJ and him are back together, and it's like, great, thank you. And I'm reading that book and happy to be there. But yeah, comics are always going to turn it and churn it and be done.
They'll always come back to the status quo.
Yeah, exactly.
The status quo will always reassert itself in comic books,
which is good and bad. The problem is the damage is done so much at this point where it is like, I just saw the new Avengers. I think Iron Man's awesome. I want to read Iron Man books. You walk into a comic shop, you look, it's Iron Man, whatever issue number they're on now. You go, well, I'll read Essential Iron Man comics. You go to the hardcover section. It's Golden Age Iron Man. It's Silver. It's Current. It's it's when the Iron Heart. Like, I understand why people are averse to getting into it, and I don't know the solution perfectly. I do love the idea of, Gary Whitta, you're a fantastic writer. Ryan Otley, you're a fantastic artist. Go make 12 issues of something. Maybe we put them out monthly. I don't think we need to. We'll just put them out as collected. That's why I love, do you read the DC Earth 1 stuff? Mm-hmm. I love that. Hey, guess what, everybody? New hardcover's coming out. It's 122 pages. We never released this issue by issue. You guys wanted to tell a story.
That's how I
here.
like it. I don't like to buy comics issue by issue. I don't want to keep them. I'm never going to be this guy, going through the box of comics.
Yeah.
I would rather just have something with a nice spine, collected, one volume that I can sit and read like a book.
Yep. Here's what I want to talk to you about, Gary Whitta. We'll get to the segments and the reading and all that stuff in the show. You're writing comics now, right?
Yes.
So, obviously we all remember you, PC gamer. You know what I mean? You're there.
I remember PC
You're
gamer.
doing all this stuff.
It's blurry, but I do remember.
Then you said, I'm quitting this. I'm writing Book of Eli. I'm gonna be a big deal. You go and you
That's
become
exactly
the big deal.
what I
That's
said.
What you said
I'm going to be
out.
a big deal.
Yeah. This is like I like to think of this narrative I'm giving you right now, told like a drunk history, where people are reenacting it. I'm gonna be a big deal.
Who would play me on Drunk History?
Patton Oswalt.
Oh,
right.
You nailed it. You nailed it right off the bat.
When does the comic part of this all enter in? Because you go to be a screenwriter, and then you're also working on games. Story consultant on Walking Dead, season 1, and now the final season.
Yeah, final season.
When does the comic part get in there?
So the comics actually one of the very first things I ever did when I kind of ended my first career as a journalist and started my career as a storyteller, screenwriter, whatever you want to call it. Big deal.
Big cheese.
Still working on the big deal part.
Sure.
I did a comic for it was a video game connection. So when the PlayStation Portable, the PSP first came out,
PSP.
that was around 2000. It would have been around 2001, 2002, somewhere in that area.
Really? I would have said, it wouldn't be 2004, 5? 2004,
Maybe
5?
it's there. I'm an old man, and the memory's the first thing to go. So you got to bear with me. It was around that time. There was one of the launch titles for the PlayStation Portable PSP
Death Jr.
was called Death Jr.
Yeah.
And it was this little kid who was like the son of the Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
And it was really fun idea for a game. And it was also one of those things where as soon as you saw the characters, you start thinking, oh yeah, animated show, Tim Burton movie, comic books, all of that. And
we have an expanded universe here, guys.
Yes, and they had interest from at the time from like the Weinstein Company, but long before the Weinsteins were known to be
before you knew that
awful
was nuclear ground.
And various other companies were interested in taking these characters and exploiting them. And so they came to me as someone who had recently transitioned from the video game side into doing comics and scripts and things like that, and said, "Do you want to can you help us take the Death Jr. characters and put them into comic books?" And we already have a deal with Image to publish the comic.
Yeah.
Ted Nafee, who's a brilliant artist, is going to draw them, but we need a writer. Do you want to do it? So I ended up doing 2. They were short runs, 3 issues a piece.
Okay.
And then we anthologized those into graphic novel 1 and graphic novel 2. So one of the very first things I actually ever had published or produced in my kind of post games writing career was a comic book. It was the Death Junior. I don't think you can find it anymore because it's pretty old. It's about 15 years old now, but it was very popular at the time. We won, I believe, we won an American Library Association award, best graphic novel for teens, because it was aimed at kids and teens.
Okay.
And it was a lot of fun. And I'll let you know a little secret. I don't think we've seen the last of those characters either.
Oh my God! The 15-year anniversary of Death Junior's rolling around.
Well, that's the great thing about Death is he's ageless.
That's true.
He's still fresh as a daisy today.
Yeah.
So that was the very first thing I did in comics was the Death Junior comic books for Image.
And so then,
Image.
how long was the gap? Because I remember it felt like, not that it was long, but I remember. Okay, cool, that had happened, and then it was you start doing the movies, and then the Star Wars stuff, and then the Mouse Guard conversation began that you were going to work on adapting that comic.
So there was a long gap after that because the screenwriting thing, which is what I really had got into the business to do, started to take off. I sold my first couple of scripts, and then I got regular writing work, and was just writing screenplays for many years. What happened was, though, I became increasingly frustrated, as so many screenwriters do, with the difficulty of getting original properties off the ground. Hollywood is interested in sequels and remakes and adaptations and reboots and all that kind of stuff. Original things are very, very difficult to make, especially if they're in any way expensive. Like, when's the last time you saw like an original science fiction movie? They do happen, but they're rare. They're statistically very rare, and they're usually from Chris Nolan type people, where they are the brand. They're able to.
And if they're not that, they're indies, and the whole story is this thing got made for $200,000 and now it's grossed $3 million.
There are ones at the mid range as well, but it's very the Wachowskis can always do something big and put something crazy out there like Jupiter Ascending, but very, very rare to see those kind of movies come to fruition. And so I increasingly. It's funny. So I worked on the movie adaptation of a Mark Millar book called Starlight. Which is a fantastic book, a lot of fun. What if Flash Gordon got old, but he had to go back and do it all over again, basically. Brilliant book. I wrote the feature film adaptation of that for 20th Century Fox. And as part of working on that project, I went to Glasgow and met with Mark and hung out with him. Fantastic. I don't know if you've ever met Mark, but he's a tremendous, tremendous guy. Obviously, he's got a peerless reputation in comics, and now is a very... Now, you want to talk about big deals, Mark is a big deal.
Yeah.
And in hanging out with him, I learned... what's that?
The Millarverse.
The Millarverse. He basically has this big corner of Netflix all to himself now. And even prior to that, pretty much every single comic that he made, I don't know how far back you have to go to find a Mark Millar comic that hasn't in some way either been made or at least sold or optioned to be a movie or a TV show as well. Hold on, who's calling me? Stop that.
Is it Mark Millar right now?
It's much. Stop talking about me.
Keep my name out of your mouth.
So what Mark does, which I think is quite brilliant, if you're a storyteller and you're interested in the film side of things, but you really just want to get your stories told, what Mark does is quite brilliant. He tells his stories first as a comic book.
Yeah.
And he gets to tell the story on his own terms without any outside interference. He obviously has an editor and collaborators and people like that, but he doesn't get people telling him what to do, like, oh, you have to change the ending or whatever. He tells the story the way he wants to tell it. For better or worse, those are his stories. And so Starlight and Empress and Huck, and he's had so many successes with his original ideas. Things that if they were written as spec scripts for movies straight off the bat might never get made. Mark wants them to be a movie, but he knows they will be eventually down the road. He starts
here, yeah. Not to storyboard it from,
For example, like Mark knows because he's the G, whether it's what if Flash Gordon got old, what if Forrest Gump was a superhero? These kind of ideas, you go, oh, what a great idea. Like, I want to see that story. So he does them first as comics, but he knows they're going to be movies down the road because the ideas are too good to not be exploited. When I was working on Starlight, it was a 6-issue, I believe, 5 or 6 issue run, and only the first 3 or 4 were already out. And but I obviously needed to know how it ended so I could adapt it.
Yeah.
So Mark sent me just the script that he sends to the artist to draw. It wasn't drawn yet.
Yeah.
So I just had the script. So I'm reading his notes to the artist in the script. And it literally says there's a big battle in the final episode, or the final issue, I should say. And it says something like to the artist, Goran Parlov, that's right. He says, Goran, okay, so we're going to draw the battle this way, blah, 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 blah. In the movie, this will probably be different, but for right now, we're going to draw it this way. And so you get this sense from Mark, or he already knows that these things he's going to sell this.
Smart, yeah.
A lot of these, and then they make the movie.
So you want creative control.
He gets to stick around as an executive producer and get to go to the premiere and have all the fun of his stuff getting made into movies, but they actually get made because, the reactive nature of Hollywood is that they wouldn't take a risk on that as an original script, but once it's out as a comic and has some notoriety and
people care.
Oh, well, now we're adapting the latest hit comic, and it's that much easier for the movie to get made. So his track record is remarkable. Kick-Ass, Wanted, Kingsman, Secret Service. Now they've done 2 of those, and now
list goes on. He's got all his Netflix stuff.
Any number of movies that will come out through Netflix. He's, I think, Empress and Huck and a bunch of others. Starlight, I did for Fox, are already in pre-production or production. So as a storyteller, I'm increasingly wondering if I want to do that rather than just work directly for films, which is always such an uphill struggle.
Sure.
Write your stories in other mediums where there's a greater likelihood of success of getting your stuff to market.
Yeah. And
now suddenly you're not selling an original script. You're selling an adaptation of something that's already been successful in another medium.
Yeah.
So maybe the Mark Millar model is the smart way to go.
Gotcha.
I want to steal Mark's ideas.
So that gets in your head, and that leads you back to comics.
So what happened was one of the very first scripts that I broke in with back in 2002 was a script called Oliver that I wrote. I originally wrote it as a spec screenplay, and that's the script that got me a manager and an agent and first kind of got my foot in the door in Hollywood. But it was a very big, ambitious, expensive science fiction type story. And my agent said, or my manager who hired me said, we love the story, we love the script, we know that we want to work with you as a writer. This piece, however, is not the best piece to introduce you to the town with because it's big and expensive and no one's ever going to make it.
Yeah, you need a foot in the door already.
Right. What else you got? And so I ended up pitching them a much smaller movie, which I then wrote, and that was actually the first thing that I ever sold. But Oliver always... It's called, at the time it was called Reaper.
Okay.
And it was about a private detective who works for the Grim Reaper tracking down people that have somehow escaped death.
Okay.
It was kind of like a mixture of like noir, like an Angel Heart kind of deal.
Okay.
So we're actually still trying to get that movie, last I heard, they're still trying to get that movie made, like 15 years later. It's funny. I always say for a movie that is about the kind of that limbo space between life and death, it is a movie
that's
that
where the movie's trapped.
Refuses to live and refuses to die. It's constantly in limbo. I think we will eventually make it. I might have some news for you on that soon, actually.
Okay, good.
But Oliver was one that. Here's the great tragedy of being a screenwriter is that you write the script and maybe 20 or 30 people ever read it, like the movie executives and producers. They say, we like it, but we're not going to make it. And it sits on a shelf. I worked on that for 6 months and 30 people read it. Come on now.
Yeah.
I want more people than that to see it.
Sure.
And so I revisited it. Oliver always scratched at me as like, there's a story that wants to be told. There's a story that wants to be told. So after meeting with Mark, I thought, fuck it, why don't I do what he does? Why don't I do it as a comic? And so I took the 120-page spec script that I wrote and stripped it for parts and kind of re-engineered it as a comic book property, and now it's going to be a comic book. So I teamed up with Derek Robertson, who I'm sure you know his work, co-creator of Transmetropolitan and The Boys. Yep. And what's the one? Oh, Happy, the one that he did recently. With Grant Morrison.
Yeah.
Tremendous artist. And
I love The Boys.
And he's now, and that's a TV, and that's now going to be a TV
that's
series
an option as well too. Sure.
And
Amazon.
so
right?
the plan is, and I want to be very clear on this. This isn't one of those cynical things where, like, remember when they put out Cowboys and Aliens as a comic book?
Yeah.
But it was never intended to really be a comic book. It was really just a glossy brochure for what they wanted the movie to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's very cynical when they do it that way. They kind of force-fed it into comic book stores to say, look, it's a comic, but it was never really organically, genuinely made in good faith as a comic book. It was really just a stepping stone to getting a movie made. If we make Oliver as a comic book, which we are doing, and it comes out, it's coming out in December.
I've read issue 1.
He's the only, Greg, you're the only person on the planet other than my wife and Derek who has ever read it. Isn't that amazing?
It's good.
You're in a very, very privileged
You left me in a very interesting spot at the end of that book where I'm like, damn, I was hoping we would get to it.
Did it make you want to read issue 2?
Yes, it did.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, you son of a bitch.
And so we took Oliver. It's going to come out in December. And if that compels people to finally make the movie version of it or a TV series or whatever, great. But that would be great.
If not, you have a great
You just want to get
them.
You just want to get the story in front of an audience, and if people read the comic and enjoy it, I'm done. That's great. Anything after that would be considered a bonus. Just want to tell the story.
Here's my next question then.
Yes.
When you're writing a comic script, what does it look like? Are you going panel by panel? Are you just giving dialogue? Are you giving just the Marvel synopsises they do and then let the artist go?
So when I first started writing comics, I had no idea how to do it, what the form was.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like I don't know. We haven't talked much about this, but like my New Year's resolution was I came up with this Superman story. I want to tell it, right? I've written it out. Issue 1 is dialogue complete. Issue 2 is pretty much there. I've done more.
Okay.
This is your update on Superman the comic book, right? But I struggle with writing it. I see what I want it to be, but then sitting there and going panel 1, panel 2, it's complicated.
That's very difficult.
Yeah.
I often say, I think that the job of a comic book writer, depending on how you want to do it, is the most difficult form of writing, because you're not just the writer, you're also in many ways the director. The editor, the cinematographer.
Yeah.
But it really depends on how you write. So I bought a book called Panel 1 years ago, and it was basically a dummy's guide to here's how you write comics.
Yeah.
And what I learned was, if you look at, say, a Grant Morrison script, a Warren Ellis script, a Brian Bendis script, a Mark Waid script, or whatever, they're all actually
remarkably different.
They're all quite different. If you look at any number of screenplays, in flipping through them, you would go, yes, this form is basically, the writing style might be different, but the formatting, the way that it's laid out, slug line, caption, dialogue, scene description, so forth, parentheticals, that's pretty much universal standard. And if you deviate from that standard, as soon as anyone opens your scripts and sees something that doesn't look like a screenplay, they go, okay, amateur.
Yeah.
So you have to fix, and that's why there is screenplay software that will, at the very least, get it into the correct format for you. Of course, that's only half the battle, but it will at least get you into the right format. Comics writing, in terms of what the script looks like, is very much more of a loosey-goosey format, and very much dependent on both the writer and the writer's relationship with the artist. Because you're writing specifically, when you write a screenplay, you're writing for any number of people that are going to read the script. When you write a comic script, you're writing for one person. You're writing for the artist who has to draw it. Yeah. And so they tend to be very specific, very personal. Like I said, in Mark's script for Starlight, there were constant little notes, just little offhand notes to the artist saying, literally things like, I apologize that you have to draw 500 soldiers in this scene, and that's this is going to suck for you.
Those are the best stories when you see like a Kirkman thing or whatever, when he's talking to Otley about like what's happening in Invincible.
Right. So it's very loosey-goosey. You can, if you some writers, I think Warren Ellis does it this way, I think Alan Moore used to do it this way, will very much direct, like literally, here's panel 1, over the shoulder shot, dimly lit, whatever, and basically the artist has got a very, 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 very specific mental blueprint to draw from. I personally don't feel that I am fluent enough in the visual, what we call sequential art, the language of comics, to confidently say, I know what belongs in each panel. Yeah. I think that an artist that I'm working with who's drawn 1 million comics knows better than me how to do that. And so when I write a comic script, it almost looks a little bit like the way I write a screenplay. Yeah. It's still broken down, more so than it's more granular than a screenplay. And I'll say, here's what's on this page, here's what's on that page. This should be a double page spread. Blow this one out or whatever. This page has got a lot of dialogue on it. But I don't say, I don't do panel 1, panel 2, panel 3. Okay. I let the artist, so with Oliver, with Derek, I let him decide what goes into each panel. With Michael Walsh on the Last Jedi comic adaptation, I let Michael decide what goes on each panel. And that's not me abdicating the responsibility, it's simply me...
Well, it's collaborative. Yes. Right? That's what people talk about all the time. The book I read, right, when I set off on this journey was Words for Pictures, which is Bendis' book.
Okay.
And he basically does that same thing of like, hey man, every comic script's different. Whatever you do is what you're going to do. Right. But he does say in there, like what you're saying, the relationship to your artist is important.
Yes.
And if you know and you've worked with them before, you just know their style, it's one thing to say, hey, here's just whatever, versus if you're just doing something and you don't know the artist, you should probably say this. Yeah. And so what I struggle with is like, this is the Superman comic, right? And it's like...
Okay. And that looks like a screenplay.
Right. And there's like things in here where I'm giving a little bit of direction, but it's not that I'm sitting there noting it to death. And so I don't know. And so I struggle with... I feel like I'm at the edge of the diving board right now, and I'm really high up. And like I know I made the promise on the show to give, not this show, even GOG, more people, to put it out there, but I don't know how to put it out there correctly for an audience that's going to be so broad.
So how are you going to do this? Are you going to collaborate with an artist to actually draw these pages and color them and ink them?
No, and also, it's up for grabs. Because that's the thing is like it's DC's property, obviously, right? So I mean, I don't want any money or anything for it. So the original idea that Kevin wanted me to do, God bless Kevin, who's not here today, it was like, all right, here's your deadline. You're not going to finish this until you have a deadline. Here's your deadline, right? And so I had it dialogue complete, but I don't have a panel complete. And so then it was like he wanted me just to put it up as it was, and I was like, well, I don't want to put up one issue and then it is this thing. And I do like the idea of, hey, everybody, I wrote this thing. It's my first one ever. Here you go. artists in the community draw what you think a page looks like. You know what I mean? And not
it would actually be fascinating to see if you gave that as bare bones as it is. And again, that's not terribly different from the way that I write on comics. If you gave that to 5 different artists, you'd get 5 very different interpretations.
Right.
So I've been very lucky, and I would work with Derek and Michael again in a heartbeat because they are able to work with me in my style. And again, I think they appreciate it. If I were to say to them, panel 1 over the shoulder, panel 2, this is a 2-shot or whatever, to me as an artist, I don't have a lot of room to express myself. All I'm really doing is tracing a very, very specific mental picture that's already been described in words.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of opportunity for me for self-expression as an artist. Like, I have a good idea for how to frame this. I've already been told how to frame it by the writer. What I like to do, and what Derek and Mike I think have appreciated as the artist's collaboration with me, is to take that bare bones and go, I know how to. I've got a good idea how to break this down.
Cool. I see the story you're telling, and let me. This is how I think it should look.
And when I get pages back from Mike or Derek, it's a delight because I see what you did there, but I didn't expect that, and now it looks great.
Yeah.
And like literally, there's for example, so when does this go out, on a Wednesday?
Yeah, it's gonna go out next Wednesday.
So next Wednesday, which is now today, as you're listening to this, The Last Jedi issue 6 is in stores today. That's the final episode, the final issue of the 6-issue run adapting the movie. The big fight between Kylo Ren and Luke Skywalker at the end when they duel. I literally wrote that. It comes right after this. I literally wrote that as just Mike. Just make this look awesome. I'm not gonna tell you every lightsaber swipe and dodge and parry and stuff like that. Just do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Like just make it look good. You've got the film. It looks brilliant.
Yeah.
And so Mike did some stuff that not only is good, but I would never have thought of, because again, I don't have his brain is trained in sequential art and how to make one panel. There's a very, very specific visual language to comics. If you think about it, there isn't another, apart from movies that sometimes mess around with like split screen.
Yeah.
There isn't really another form where you're seeing more than one thing all at once, right? When you open a comic page, you see that each panel has its own life and its own identity and its own visual style, but then the page itself also has to be taken into consideration. Does the page look too busy? Does it look like it has room to breathe? Is it maybe just one panel or 9? Is it a page with a lot of dialogue? And artists have to make all those, writers and artists together make all those decisions about what's the overall look of the book, and that sequential flow of kind of moving from one panel to another. So Mike took a couple of lines of me saying, just make the fight look awesome, dude, because you're better at this than I am. He did it, and he not only made it look awesome, but he did some visual tricks that, again, never in a million years would I have thought of. But he does because his brain is trained in that particular language.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating. I love the idea of giving that script to like 5 different artists and seeing how they would all interpret it.
Sure.
Because because that's what I like about writing it in that vague way, is that it gives the artist a lot of room to explore and experiment and have fun.
Interesting.
Yeah. You're learning a lot here, aren't you, Greg?
I can tell. I'm just soaking it in. I'm sponging it up from you.
How are you going to do... So you said you don't own Superman. What's the way forward for you in this project?
I think it's to get my feet wet and then do my own thing. You know,
like create your own characters, like create an invincible type thing.
Well, that's I don't even know. That's a bridge too far. But it's. Do I have talent in it? Do I want to keep doing it? And what would it look like beyond that? Because that's the other problem too. Is that as soon as I started talking a big talk about this, so many people have come out to be like, "Oh, I'd love to talk to you about this or do this or blah blah." And it's like, okay, cool. So then like, you know, you go. This is all my comics folder, and then I have these different pitches for different things.
These are for different properties.
Like this is my own thing. That's my own thing. That's just a thing. And then obviously that's clearly what that is.
Okay.
But like, all of those have been spurred on by someone talking to me and being like, "Oh, we'd love to see what would you hear." And then it's like, okay, cool. And then like when you get Superman in the script, right, in the story and all that jazz I wrote, dude, that was second nature. What they're saying, who they are, where it goes, what I'm doing. Okay, cool, blah, blah, blah. And then when it was like, we'd love to see you try to do your own thing. All right, cool. And I wrote, and then I got lost in the thing of like, well, this character is this character, but that's their father. Well, what's their relation? What's this? And what's the town called? And it was like, oh my God, I was
So do you feel
overwhelmed.
like it was easier for you as a new comics writer just learning it
I'm not a comics writer, but yeah.
Well, no, but as someone who wanted to learn how to write comics
Picking
and try
up the
your
bat
hand
for
at
the
it,
first time, yeah.
It was easier. Do you feel like it was easier for you to walk into characters
100%.
that were already defined?
I mean, it's the idea of like, I think if somebody was like, man, you can have your own IP and own all this different stuff and da-da-da-da, or you could just write some weirdo in the DC universe that's already established. I'd be like, oh, weirdo in the DC universe. I know that universe. I don't have to answer those questions. I get to sit down and tell a cool story with a cool character.
Right.
Whereas when it's like your own IP and shit, I'm like, I don't fucking know.
It's easier to inherit that bunch of stuff than start from a blank piece of paper.
Right. And I think that's the thing of like just being in the deep end of it, right? Of trying to figure out, in the general what a comic page for me is going to look like written. It's hard to think about expanding that beyond that scope even.
Yeah.
Gary?
Yes.
What I want you to know, usually where we start the show, not 43 minutes in, what's the best thing you read this month?
You know what I got from that comic book store that's right downstairs from here?
Comic Experience Outpost. That's right, yeah.
Really fun store. I like them in there.
They're great.
It's a nice little mom and pop neighborhood store.
Go in there, tell Julie. Kind of funny saying.
There's two. So there's Comic Experience on Divisadero, which is the bigger store.
That's the bigger one,
And then the smaller one, Outpost, which is right here. Both very good stores. I picked up a graphic novel there, which I didn't even know this is something they had made, but a writer by the name of a writer and an artist, because he did it all himself, by the name of Box Brown, wrote a graphic novel about the creation of Tetris. Oh. And it's simply called Tetris.
Okay.
And it is a very fascinating look at not just the creation of the game and like how Alexei Pajitnov came up with the idea for it, and then as I'm sure you know at least some of this, there's a huge, massive story just about the clamor that there was to license the game, and Spectrum Holobyte got involved, and all these different companies, and Nintendo, and there was all kinds of, and the Russian government got involved, and there were all kinds of. It'd be a great movie or TV series, actually, like a kind of.
I guarantee it will be
like
day.
a great *Halt and Catch Fire* kind of story about how Tetris was made.
Somebody Alexei, like the nicest guy.
The only time I've ever been starstruck in this business was when I met Alexei Pajitnov.
I don't remember what event it was, but it was in the my early-ish days, so 2009 or earlier, where we went to something and he was there. It must have been showing some version of Tetris, and he was so nice and so great, insisted on doing vodka shots with us. He's like, I'm Russian. I'm like, all right.
I was at E3, or it may even have been CES at the time before E3 existed, many, many years ago. Well, it might be one of the first E3s, and it was like Weltris or Hatris or one of those terrible spin-offs, because they marketed Tetris into the ground and did all these different versions of it. But I was hanging around at the Microsoft booth, because Lexi worked for Microsoft for many years, just developing games. And the Microsoft rep that I was there with said, "Oh, by the way, Gary," and it was a guy. I could sense that there was a guy standing right behind me having another conversation, but I didn't know who it was. He was behind me, and then he kind of said, "Oh, by the way, Gary, have you met Alexei?" And you instantly knew who it was. Yeah. And I just I literally was like, bah, 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 bah. And I said to him, I think all I could manage to say was like, I apologize, but I'm so starstruck to meet you, I don't quite know what to say. And he just kind of went, ho, ho, ho. Yeah. He's like a big avuncular video game Santa Claus with his big beard, and he's a big stocky guy. And he was like, ho, ho, ho. And he was just this really nice, friendly guy. Yeah. And I felt so happy for him that he's obviously had this, that he created one of the truly, truly, truly great pieces of popular culture of our generation. So is this graphic
novel based on a biography, a story, or like a whole bunch of different reports?
I think the guy, look at that, he's just got drinks, like never-ending flagons.
Well, this is why Cool Greg's the best and Kevin Coelho sucks.
It's like that Stein in Thor Ragnarok. The Doctor Strange just keeps refilling it for him. So Box Brown, the writer and the artist, he's also done other true life. I think he did one about Andre the Giant.
Oh no shit! He's the same. I gave that to Cool Greg. Cool Greg's got that on his desk.
So Box Brown, who did the graphic novel life story of Andre the Giant,
that was pulled from all sorts of sources. Yeah,
he then did the story of Tetris.
Wow,
and Alexei.
What a great!
And as far as I know, he just went and did all his own research, and it was really fascinating. And it's also got some really interesting. Like, it goes back to caveman times and talks about how like games and game theory are fundamental to our experience as human beings. It's like the way that we play games. There's a reason why we play games, and it's deep ingrained in our lizard DNA. Like competition and fun and play are things that are so hardwired into us. That's why we always come back to playing video games. Yeah, is because somewhere deep down there's that need to test ourselves, against others. Sure. To solve puzzles, to it's something that's so human about that. And that's one of the reasons why Tetris, it's one of the most perfect distillations of that. We talk about the Tetris effects. They studied that, where people even hours after they stopped playing the game would close their eyes and still see the shapes. Yeah. That was that was studied, and it just got into our brains. There was a time when I could play Tetris without any hardware. I was a master proponent of the Tetris effect. My brain.
All right, guys, I'm going to shut my eyes for a second. You sleeping? No, I'm playing Tetris.
I could basically randomly generate Tetris shapes and play it, and of course you hear the music. I think I told the story the other day about the Game Boy. I bought the Game Boy when it came out in 1989.
Yeah.
And it came with, if you remember, it shipped with Tetris.
I remember. How can I forget?
And it never that Tetris cartridge is still pretty much fused into my Game Boy. It never left.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever played another Game Boy game other than Tetris, because why would you want to?
Of course.
But so to bring this back to comics, Box Brown.
Gotcha.
It's called Tetris. It's very easy to find. It's a very breezy read. It's drawn and written in the style of kind of like an indie comic. So the art style is very simplistic, but the writing style is if you know anything about the history of Tetris, you can tell that this guy's really done his homework. Not just the theory behind why the game is so popular, but also the kind of the incredible business machinations and skullduggery, because people as people started to realize, holy shit, this is $1 billion game that we're sitting on here. There was a lot of people flying midnight flights to Russia, people flying back and forth trying to desperately outdo each other for the rights. Just a fascinating kind of corporate story of kind of one-upmanship and business intrigue that brings us to where we are today with Tetris, still being this phenomenon. Tetris Effect
about to drop sometime this year.
Even as we speak now, 30 years after the original Tetris, there's a new version still coming out.
And I can't wait.
Anyway, if you're interested at all in
that's a great one,
in why human beings fascinated by games and play them, and the really interesting story behind the creation of Tetris and how it ended up on various different consoles and machines around the world, that was a really interesting read.
Great pick.
Thank you.
Best thing I read this month is Captain America number 695.
That's a lot of comics.
Stick with me. You're here on a whim, of course. You tried to book yourself on this show many a time. And I'm always like, I'm booked out.
Well, I wanted to come on to talk to you after we had that Superman controversy.
And then you hit me up and I was like, hey, can you do this? You're like, I can't. What about next? And I was like, I'm booked till December. And you're like, I don't know what I'm doing next week, let alone December.
And then you had a drop out at the last minute.
Chris Anka, of course, the artist on Runaways and Kind of Funny best friend, he was scheduled to come up and do the show normally. And 50 minutes in, I teased 50 minutes ago that I was going to tell you why this didn't go up on the first Wednesday of the month. He was supposed to come in on that Tuesday and do the show with us. Got sick, sadly. He will be in later, obviously. But Chris Anka is the guy who came on the Game Over Greggy show and was basically like, cool, I've listened to everything you've ever done and I have a bone to pick with you. Captain America doesn't suck. And it was before
You think Captain America sucks?
I've struggled forever pretty much to connect with the guy.
Just in general?
The argument I have against him always is that it's the same thing people probably hate about Superman. We're like, he's just a Boy Scout. He's just a soldier. I don't get it. Man out of time only works for so long. MCU in Review came after that episode of Chris Anka, where I really did find an appreciation of the character in Captain America, Winter Soldier.
Through MCU, you've come to like him more.
Right. Seeing them all together sequentially, like with, a week or two in between them, really drove home some of the themes that were in him that I didn't know.
I mean, I felt, you say man out of time, but it's really a moral parable, isn't it? It's about a man from... It's not necessarily about an anachronistic thing like, I haven't seen the latest movies. They get little jokes out of that. He's got his notebook things he has to catch up on. But what it's really about is a man from a morally uncompromising time forced now to live in a morally compromised time. There's all kinds of character conflict that comes from that.
But I feel like that story isn't told as much. I agree. I'm fascinated and I'm in. So what Chris had done after he did the GOG with me and he left a whole bunch of suggestions. We did it publicly on Twitter a couple months ago, and it was that he was going to come up. So I read a bunch of Captain America. One of the first things he recommended was Captain America, the 2004 run, basically 1 through 6, and then on if I wanted to. But which would be, and it's hard to think back this far of 2004. This was the Winter Soldier stuff.
This is the Ed Brubaker stuff.
Right, where they're introducing, we didn't know it was going to be Bucky. We didn't know Bucky was back. Obviously, MCU now is obviously told these stories very well and all these different things. I struggled so hard to get through the first few issues because it literally, even the drawing of him, I'm like, you're just this jarhead grandfather. Like, I'm not even interested. Like, you are such a caricature of what a soldier would be in this day and age that came from this time and doesn't understand. And they're trying to wrestle with this, like, the blonde Sharon. Are you good enough on this?
No.
Sharon Carter, right? Yeah. Cool, great. Can I get a Google search of Sharon Carter Marvel? Keeps talking to him like, hey, Nick sent me to look after you because you're not right in the head and we can tell something's wrong. And he's like, I'm fine. He just wasn't giving me anything. And I was like, ugh. And I stopped and I was like, the other thing Chris recommended was Captain America 695 on pretty much. Yeah, I nailed this. Sharon Carter. I crushed every. Don't worry about it.
Is Sharon Carter the original? No, that's Peggy Carter, right? Is Sharon Carter her daughter or something?
Well, in MCU, Sharon Carter is Peggy Carter's niece, grandniece, something like that. I don't know. I couldn't tell you her
And she's a Shield agent.
Shield agent. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So I was like, you know what? This is from 2004. Maybe that's part of the problem too. Instead, jump to Captain America 695 on Marvel Unlimited, which is a way more recent run. Mark Waid and Chris Samney. And let me tell you, Gary, by the end of this issue, I was crying. Like I was teared up because they nailed it.
What's happening in this run?
So what they do is tell this awesome story. Basically, it's where we're picking up from, and I don't know this. I read enough of this to pick up on it, right? It's post Captain America Hail Hydra.
Okay.
And basically it is the recap of, yep, this other guy took my place and I took him out and now I'm basically touring America trying to reconnect with the people and reconnect with America.
He's got to rebuild his brand up again.
He's not even doing the brand thing as much as being Steve Rogers on a motorcycle, like going town to town. And so they open the story telling it of, it's a flashback to Burlington, Nebraska, right? Where these guys, Rampart, are assaulting the town, doing stuff. Captain America comes in, fights them off, saves the day, saves this little girl, and like gives her a speech of like, you know, like you're bigger than him. You take care. And it's a little boy. Like you take care of him. That's how it works. You know, the strong take care of the weak kind of thing. And he saves her and all these different things. And then it's a or I guess a jump to current time of Captain America. It was him rolling out of town on his bike in what would have been 10 years ago, I think it was. And then it's him, and it's like pretty much right after he came back around. And then it's him rolling back into town 10 years later, or amount of time later. And now the town's been renamed Captain America, Nebraska.
Okay.
And they're doing their annual Captain America festival of like when he came and saved the day pretty much. And so you're like, is he just navel gazing and coming back? But he's like, he comes to the festival. He's talking, I think, to Sharon of like, yeah, you know, basically like now that I don't need to be tied to New York for whatever happened in the other stuff, I'm looking around on where I want home base to be. And, he goes to the festival and everybody's there and like people start getting up to the mic and telling stories about how Captain America saved them or how this happened or what he's done or how he's inspired them. And eventually the Rampart people show back up and they're like, this is fucking bullshit, you know, dude, 10 years ago, blah, blah, now we're gonna, and he hits them with the shield and he fights them and it's like Captain America does his thing and then at the end they're like, you did it, you saved us again. And it's just like, it's the best. What I love about Superman when he's done really well, he's like, I didn't do anything. That guy ran in and saved that person when the explosion happened. She did. And he's very much like, you all inspire me. You all inspire each other. That's what this is all about. And it ends with the girl he saved 10 years ago, now grown up, being like, finishing his thing of, he's like, that's how it works, you know, the strong take. And she's like, take care of the weak, like, happy to have you back kind of thing. And it's, the art by Samney is so beautiful. I wanted to show you, like, the art's so great. The storytelling.
This is currently where Captain America is, or is this?
No, this is on Marvel Unlimited, so it's old to begin with. But I mean, like the art's just gorgeous. You see him fighting it and being.
But how far back? I mean, like when was this originally published? This first version of this story?
Not that far back.
Okay,
because
pretty recent.
You figure I downloaded. Okay, so hold on, I can do this. I don't use Marvel Unlimited that much. November 1st, 2017.
Okay, so it's
almost a year ago, right?
Old. Okay, so
and then they
recent.
start this run of other Cap books of like. I stuck with it and I was into it and feeling it, and then they do this whole like far-flung future thing and I was like, damn, that's not it. But for the first time it was Captain America books that I really dug, because the next one is him going to another town, right? It's very much like Michael J. Straczynski's Superman, where he was called Grounded and he walked across the United States.
America, yeah.
He rolls in the next one and it is like, yeah, you know, he's there and like the town flips out because Steve Rogers is as famous as Captain America. They put it together. They're doing this by happenstance, of course. A villain was in town. He's like, fuck, he came and found me, and like gives himself. It was just great small run stories of what Captain America and Steve Rogers is that speaks so much to what I think Chris Evans's Captain America in the MCU is. And so it really just connected for me in a way I wasn't expecting, especially after coming off the 2004 Captain America.
That's one of
books.
the things that you want to see Captain America doing, is like going around and like connecting with America, right? Whether it be big cities or small towns, like just connecting with, you know, what it means to be American and what America really means. I don't want to get too political, but I guess Captain America has always been political since its very formation. I would make the argument that the Captain America is probably the most germane hero that we have right now. Like, America is so fucked up right now that you feel like Captain America is something that we all want to kind of reach for and go like, why can't we have more of that?
Right. I mean, that's the line from, again, MCU, but also from the comics, and I want to say Civil War, about planning yourself about what's right and what's wrong, and when somebody's coming at you saying you're not right, you plant yourself and you're like, no, I am right. Like, that's totally what everybody's thinking.
But it's like when you say something like, that's what America's all about, the strong take care of the weak. There are plenty of people in America right now that would disagree with you. That's outrageous.
Or they'd lie to your face and say that, but we don't want to get political. Mario Miranda wrote in though, and he's read Captain America 600 95 through 700, just like I did. The Wade.
So it's like a five-issue story run. Is that what this is?
Yeah, maybe. I think that's about right.
5 or 6.
He says, it's hard not to like any book that's made by Wade and Samney, especially one with Cap. I was really looking forward to Wade coming back to Cap since his 90s Cap run was one of the books that I really remember fondly from the late 90s. Even though the filler issues and the future storyline were pretty enjoyable, I did find myself being fairly disappointed by this run. I really hoped it would be a long, overarching character run like Wade and Samney did with Daredevil, and not just filler until Coates would come on. So it's already ended, the other person's come on, and that was my complaint too. Especially considering I feel the first 3 issues are so strong of capping one time, capping another time, then fighting Kraven the Hunter. But then it does do this like, now we're in the future and everything's going to hell. And like, all right, like there's cool ideas in there again. And again, I liked this way more than the 2004 stuff, but I would have preferred to keep getting what I was getting before of very small Steve Rogers stories. And if I'm being honest, I had other stuff on the pull list. Batman 52 through 53, Amazing Spider-Man 3 and 4, Superman 2, Action 1002. Obviously, we're way over time on where we normally are with the show, but also none of them blew my hair back. Usually on this show, I'm always like, oh man, Tom King, so amazing. And Tom King is very, very amazing, don't get me wrong. But his finale to the Mr. Freeze Batman storyline, I was like, no, that wasn't as what I thought. That wasn't as good.
This is like the currently where
current
comics
Batman,
are at?
yeah. Because there was a great thing I talked about last show and then moved into this of basically like Catwoman left Bruce at the altar, Batman at the altar, devastates him.
That's how the whole marriage event turned out? She jilted him at the altar?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
We move on.
It's a very Catwoman thing to do,
We
though,
move
isn't it?
on to, it's the trial of Mr. Freeze.
Okay.
Bruce Wayne's been pulled for jury duty, and he's on the jury now, and it's Batman that brought him in. And you get these two
Surely
issues.
Bruce would have to recuse himself.
It turns out in this issue, spoilers, that he actually put himself on the jury to undo Batman's mistake.
Oh, he pulled some strings?
Because Batman was totally, Bruce Wayne Batman is totally off his rocker of like racked with grief and just wants to get the job done and is like, confess. And Mr. Freeze confesses because he's got the shit beat out of him. And then on the stand's like, you don't know Batman like I know Batman. If I wouldn't have confessed, he would have killed me. I've never seen him like that. I had to. And Bruce is in the jury box being like, yep, I would have. You know what I mean? Like,
interesting.
So it's like this awesome dynamic. And then I just thought the end fizzled personally.
Okay.
So, and then, yeah, like even the Spider-Man books, I'm behind on a lot of stuff. It's been a busy month for Greg Miller Game Guy. So comic guys had to take a back seat. But yeah, best thing I read was Captain America. So good, shout out to Chris Anka.
Did Batman go all crazy on Mr. Freeze, all fucked up because he was left at the altar? Is it related to that?
That's the idea that he's like so angry that he's taking his anger out on his villains.
Right.
That moves us on, Gary Whitta, to required reading. Last month, Irene Coe came through, and what she picked was Vagabond, Volume 1.
That's a thick book.
A manga. And that's what and there was some confusion. I know Kayla in general put in her thing she was confused. Because, of course, Irene brought the giant book and said, we're just talking. And she's like, you don't need to buy the whole book, just Volume 1. Which I ordered, which then gave me this giant book. But I did just read Volume 1.
Oh, so this part is just the part you had to read.
That's the part of Volume 1. There's 3 volumes collected in Vagabond 1, 3, and 1. The tale of 2 samurais, basically out in war. They're young boys. They are spared, and then the adventure that follows.
So it's set in feudal Japan?
Yes. I don't want to go that far as what I know when the time period is, but yes, it's not modern.
The time of the samurai?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, they're in war doing all this different thing. We follow the main character of Takezo and his best friend, Matahachi. I spelled them out because I'm bad at this. You know how bad I am.
You did it phonetically, yeah.
How if I do too much? Again, and Gary, you're the first person ever to be relieved of required reading duties.
Because they came in so late. I didn't have a chance to look at this.
It's understandable. Again, Chris Anka hates you, hates the fans, and hates Greg Miller. So he got sick on purpose.
Seems very clear.
Ate raw chicken and did this to get in. Personally, all right. Didn't do much. I mean, it was all right. I finished Volume 1 on the plane, and I was like, "Woof! All right, let's play video games." Because I just didn't want to keep reading.
So you didn't feel compelled to continue?
And that's not a knock against the book, because I'll read the reviews from the readers. Obviously, again, Patreon.com/kindafunny. You can support us at the $15 level, be part of the show, and get all the other perks too. It's not just that. I'm not a manga guy. Let alone I'm not really.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are you even a manga guy?
I'm not a feudal Japan guy either. Really,
right.
I'm looking forward to Ghost of Tsushima because it's Sucker Punch, but. Yeah, it didn't do much for me. I thought it moved a little too quick. I like the art. The art, of course. I mean, beautiful. Like, I think manga has such a unique style.
Do you read this
to
from
it.
back to front, like true
of course.
old school
Oh,
style?
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, and I'll tell you, I've done that before, obviously, with mangas, but still breaks my brain.
Yeah,
like,
it's
no,
tough.
start over at the right, move
it's
to
tough.
the left.
Yeah,
do all
so
this
you start here and you read this way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's rough.
Yeah, it screws you up or whatever. It's an interesting enough story, but yeah, like I said, I wasn't compelled to go. Like I thought it was. Cool, they're fighting. Cool, they've met these women that are taking care of them. Cool, they're having sex. I like that. One of them's got the devil inside him and is an amazing sword fighter. All right, just it felt very run of the mill samurai story, which I'm not compelled, but I am in the minority, although I'm not alone. Jericho wrote in to patreon.com.
This is other people that have read it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Usually we get to these kids a lot faster.
Okay.
Today, you and me.
Well, we had a
great
longer chat.
Jericho says, after reading the first volume, I gotta say, one thing dominates this book, and it's the art style. It is incredibly beautiful. The detail and he's talking about Takehiko Inu, can go into with these pencil drawings, it's unreal. The way he can illustrate facial expressions is on another level. You can actually see what the people feel. Yeah, please feel free to page
have a quick browse.
I love the characters. They aren't typical manga characters. That are overly shy with blood streaming out of their noses once they see a cute girl. They seem real, likable, and are sometimes pretty funny. The granny definitely felt a bit out of the normal, but the foreseeable twist at the end was pretty funny, as she seems to be the one person with the most power at the moment. Yeah, I don't read enough manga to tell you what's in or out. I thought they were doing very much the anime-y tropes, and especially Valkyria Chronicles, they were freaking out to him at certain points, but you're right that I guess it isn't over that.
Have you ever read a manga that you did really enjoy?
Ghostbusters.
There was a Ghostbusters manga?
Yeah.
Of course there was.
Of course there was. I'll bring it in. You can read it.
I should have seen that coming.
Mario Miranda said, this is the first time I've read a proper manga and found it mostly enjoyable. There's no doubt that the artwork is phenomenal with wildly varying perspectives and complexity. This really was a showcase for the amazing art. The story, on the other hand, I didn't find myself enjoying as much. The book starts very abruptly, and then as it goes along, I felt like I had missed something, as it felt like there were time jumps. First, it felt weird after Takezo and I didn't spell this one out. Matahashi are rescued, and then the time jump of having healed up and having familiarity with the women, it just seemed rushed. Felt like there was a bit missing and needed overall. I felt like there was a bit missing, and it was needed for the overall pace of the book. Magnus said, Vagabond made me really hyped for Ghost of Tsushima. Also love that the required reading has been different every month, not only superheroes or Image Comics. Really like this one. Keep them coming. Adam Inc. says, this is my first Japanese manga since Dragon Ball Z 10 years ago, so I had zero expectations. Driving into the brick of Vagabond, I was immediately struck by the consistency and maturity of the artwork. The book is consistently moving at a rapid pace with what little writing is strictly spoken between the characters. I find this pace was great for fighting and getting into the setting, like a movie, but as an artist, I want to spend more time enjoying the artwork. The manga storytelling drives the readers to speed through the artwork. All that being said, the storytelling does move at a great pace, never leaving an area too soon or having a moment drag. Kayla, who I mentioned, did read the entire thing. The artwork speaks for itself. It's incredible. And the work that he put into this book, the individual long blades in the grass, the deep forest, so on and so forth. End of volume 3 definitely has me wanting more, and I'm intrigued to seeing Miyamoto grow from a young man honing his skills to the man that will be the samurai, invincible under the sun. So I think there's more to it, but I was like, I don't really want to get into that, you know what I mean? Not for me, Gary Whitta, as they say. And then, yeah. Gary.
Yes.
You didn't have to do the required reading.
No.
However, you get to pick the next required reading. What are we all reading for the next month?
So, it's interesting. We started the show by talking a lot about Superman, and now we come full circle because I brought in one of my... when you asked me to bring something in, I went into my little library room. I have a little box room that has my books in it, and I thought, what do I want to pick? And I wanted to pick something that would be at least nothing too obscure, but also nothing too well known. And I looked at a bunch of stuff. I thought about doing Warren Ellis's Ministry of Space, which is really fun. I thought about doing Frank Miller's Ronin, which is one of his lesser known but very, very good works.
Sure.
But I ended up deciding on this. It's one of my favorite Superman stories. Superman versus Muhammad Ali.
Okay.
It's really, really fun. It's a classic. It's a relatively, as you can see, relatively slim volume, so easy to read. It's a very quick read. You can read the whole thing in I would say probably an hour or so.
Yeah, I was going to say one sitting. No problem.
Yeah, you can do it in one sitting. Easy to write this off as a gimmick.
Sure.
Which of course it is.
Yeah.
But they did a very, very good job with it.
When did it, I've read this before. It's been years. When did it come out?
So this was published. This would have been published at the height of Ali's fame.
Okay.
So I want to say Jimmy Carter was president. So I want to say like 78-ish, something like that.
Yeah. There it is in the back, 78.
So published in 1978. This is post Rumble in the Jungle. Like Ali was absolutely at the height of his powers, the height of his fame. If you're a fan of Superman, and Muhammad Ali as I am of both, you're going to love this. I don't want to get too much into the story, but I was really so. I picked it up. I was in a comic book store and I never knew this thing existed.
Really?
I wasn't aware of it until this is a relatively new
printing
deluxe edition that they put together and get it for $20. I think it's quite easy to find in comic stores.
Oh yeah, you'll have no problem getting this one.
I picked it up and I said to the guy behind the comic book store, behind the counter, I was like, okay, how does this work? I get it. Ali is the greatest.
Yeah.
Superman, like,
it's an alien from another planet.
The lightest punch is gonna ether him into red mist. And the guy and the comic book said, well, that's why you got to read it, because it's interesting to see how they do it.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to give anything away, but they do find a way to make the bout between
actually matter.
Yes, I mean, like, literally the entire Earth is at stake.
Oh damn!
They're fighting for the fate of all life on Earth. And they do find a way to make Superman and Muhammad Ali fight on equal terms. I'm sure some of you out there can already imagine like ways in which they make that work.
Kryptonite gloves.
No, there's no kryptonite involved.
Okay.
Well, I mean, do you want me to just tell you?
No, I don't. Okay. I've read it before. I'm playing along.
Okay, so I don't want to spoil it for our readers.
Superman versus Muhammad Ali is your required reading for
and
next month.
They make it an epic battle. And one of the things that I like about it, because going back to what we talked about earlier, without giving too much away, we talked about how one of the reasons why Superman is tricky is that he's often too powerful.
Yeah.
Superman, for the majority of this book, doesn't have his powers. So it's what does Superman do when he can't rely on his usual bag of tricks?
Yeah.
So it's really fun. I really enjoyed it, and again, it's a quick read, and it's a classic little weird thing in the annals of Superman's history that I recommend everybody read.
Perfect. We haven't had a superhero book in a long time for required reading, so that's awesome. Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Whitta.
I'm happy to have brought it in for you.
Gary, we've already updated the kids on Superman. Now it's time for the big questions. Mario Miranda wrote into patreon.com/kindafunny and says, Mr. Whitta, he's talking about Last Jedi. He put this thing in about basically.
Did people know that I was coming in?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh come on. Now. I'm not gonna.
You're a professional.
Come on. Well, he's talking about the Last Jedi adaptation.
Yes.
He says, "What was different? I mean, was the experience what you expected? Did anything like differ from your opinions? Did you lobby for a specific artist, or was Walsh chosen by Marvel for this project? How was working with Walsh? Thanks."
Marvel paired me with Michael, and I love the fact that they did, because again, he was able to work with me in my style, which is to really kind of leave the sequential side of it to him and say, look, here's what happens on the page. But in terms of if this is one panel or two panels or whatever, you figure that out.
Had you met him before?
No.
So then did you like meet?
I knew his work. He has done Star Wars work before. He's a Marvel artist. Done a lot of work. He lives up in Canada. Really, really nice guy. And draws in a way that is almost like that. His style is almost reminiscent of the old school Marvel Star Wars comics. Remember Marvel used to do Star Wars comics back in the day. And it's very reminiscent of that style. And we both liked the movie. We both felt like there were areas that we wanted to, it's tricky when you do adaptations because you cannot co-opt or change the intent of the film. I can't make any substantial changes. I can't suddenly turn Kylo Ren into a good guy, right? Or decide that Luke doesn't die at the end, right? There are certain things that you have to kind of.
He
stay
dies,
within.
but then he winks at the.
What I was able to do, there are little things that I wanted to do. Like it really bummed me as a big Admiral Akbar fan. It really bummed me out that Admiral Akbar didn't. He just kind of dies off screen in the film, and I felt like. Not that I felt like the movie owed him better than that. It's just that I, as a fan, wanted to see more of that.
Yeah.
And so one of the little grace notes I was able to insert into the book, and really the comic is very faithful to the film. It's just little bits here and there that we did that I was able to kind of give Admiral Akbar like a little last line. And I never realized what a big deal that was. But like the next day after the comic came out, there was like 8 different stories on the comic book wires and the comic book blogs about, oh my God, look at this moment for Admiral Akbar they didn't have in the film. Like people really appreciated that. I think the biggest thing that I was able to do that I really, really liked was change the perspective of the scenes between Rey and Luke. So if you remember in the movie, Rey, you're anchored to kind of Rey's point of view. You're with her when she flies with Chewie aboard the Millennium Falcon to Ahch-To, goes and she approaches Luke, and Luke's kind of goes back to Luke is the other. Yeah, right? You're with Rey, and Luke is the other. The way I did it from the comic book perspective is I flipped it, so it's the same scenes, but you're with Luke, and Rey is the other, coming to bother him from the isolation, kind of disrupt his isolation on the island, and one of the things that you can do one of the things that you try to do in any medium is play to the strengths of the medium. One of the things that I would never have suggested doing this in the movie because it would have been hokey, but in a comic book, you can give Luke an internal monologue.
Totally.
So
see what he's thinking, what motivates
if you were to hear, like in voiceover, what Luke was thinking in the movie, that would have seemed really cheesy. That's just not a technique we see used in films very often. But it's used all the time in comic books.
100%.
And so I was able to get inside Luke's head a little bit more and kind of just feel like his tortured soul, all that isolation and all the conflict within him, which is so, central to what it means to be a Jedi, to have that conflict being pushed between the light and the darkness. Sure. I was able to kind of get in there and play with his inner thoughts a little bit more.
Well, this is what you didn't take flack for, but what there was people saying, like there was that article put up, right, of like the Star Wars comics fixed The Last Jedi.
Yeah, and I thought that was bogus. It was never intended to fix anything. The film didn't need fixing. I mean, I know there are people out there that don't like the film. I liked it. I didn't feel like it needed fixing. It was just an opportunity to, what can we do in a comic book form that the film would have struggled to do?
Sure.
So, for example, get inside Luke's head with some interior monologue. We were able to do that in the film. I will say this. So we're going out on Wednesday. The last issue that's out today and it's an interior monologue Luke moment. I was able to write a little bit of dialogue over his final moment, when he's levitating on the stone on Ahch-To.
That's awesome.
And he fades out and recommunes with the Force. I actually wrote dialogue for him over that. So I got to write Luke Skywalker's canonical final words, which is pretty cool.
So how does that work then for you writing a comic that is Star Wars canon? Because obviously we've talked about Rogue One before and a million different things. Are you writing these scripts and then it's a lot different than Oliver, I assume. You're sending them to
so it goes
Lucas?
to Lucas. So just like when I was working on Rogue One, Lucasfilm Story Group see everything goes to them, and it's their job. They are kind of the final arbiters of do this, don't do that. Okay. So, and I was very, very fortunate. There wasn't, again, I never did anything that suggested upending the ship. It was just like, let's give back our final line. Let's get inside Luke's head a little bit more. Let's do this and that. Let's give Leia a moment when she's having a Mary Poppins moment in space. Let's get inside her head a little bit and understand like what is going on there. And so little things that the comic was able to do that a movie would have struggled with. And I would say out of every 10 changes that I suggested, Story Group were fine with like 8 or 9, and then the last 1 or 2 would be anything between like straight up don't do that or that's great, just make a little tweak to it. So I got to do almost everything I wanted to do. Yeah. I was really worried that they were going to shoot down Luke's final line, but they let it go, and it's in the comic, which is out today. So I'm very excited about that. I'm looking forward to people seeing
What did they shoot down that you wanted to keep?
Well, I tried to make Life Day canon. They didn't like that. There was a moment in the opening battle when Poe is kind of that one man attack on the dreadnought, where I believe Hux, they said like he's now in firing range, sir, and Hux says something like, "What are you waiting for? Life Day? Shoot at him!" And I was like, they're never going to let this go. And I got the line back saying, "Yes, very funny, but we're not ready to canonize Life Day just yet." And so I didn't get to. But I was that close.
That's awesome.
That close.
Look at you fighting the good fight.
I'm trying.
Kayla wrote in and said, Gary, I'm looking forward to reading Oliver in December. Greg is obviously interested in doing a Superman comic, but what superhero comic would you want to do?
I like Iron Man.
Yeah?
Yeah. I like characters.
What do you like about
I like Iron Man. I like Batman. I like the Punisher. I don't really like the Punisher's a little too dark for me, but I think if you look, what's the common thread there? It's characters that aren't born with anything special.
I was going to say human beings who have the abilities.
I mean, you could argue that Tony's born with great intellect.
Well, same thing for Batman.
With Batman as well. But those are things that they have earned rather than I got bit by a radioactive spider or I happen to be from another planet that gives me immense powers.
I just happened. I landed here with this yellow sun.
It's still a struggle because as we said at the top of the show, what do you then do with those powers? But I generally tend to gravitate towards characters that earned rather than inherited their specialness.
Sure.
So I like Iron Man for that reason because he builds that suit, right? I mean, his only superpower is he's an engineering genius.
Well, there's that great line in the Avengers, right? Where you take away that suit, what are you? He's like, billionaire,
playboy,
philanthropist. You're like, it's like,
I'm actually pretty special without the suit.
Exactly. No.
The other line I love when they reference that is in Spider-Man: Homecoming when Peter Parker says to Tony, "I'm nothing without that suit," and he says, "If you're nothing without the suit, you shouldn't have it."
Yeah, exactly. What a great movie.
Yeah.
Luca Dale wrote in and said, question, in honor of Spider-Man PlayStation 4 being released, what other superhero games do you think need to be made? Personally, I think a Wonder Woman game in the style of the new God of War would be dope.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
That's a great idea, actually, Luca. That's really, really good. Obviously, I want Superman games, and I've pitched it.
Do you think
before.
she would be fighting through like ancient mythological Greece in that?
You'd think so. I mean, like, she's so tied to that, right? Of like, Zeus being her dad and Hades and
Themyscira
all
and
that
all
stuff.
that
Yeah,
stuff,
exactly. Like, you could do something really cool there. And that's the thing is, what Marvel's doing so well, so far, I should say, is with Spider-Man, hey, talented developers, here's an IP everybody loves. Do something cool with it. I'd love to see DC get on that train, even though they were the first to pioneer it with Rocksteady. Of being like, hey, guys, here's the thing. Don't tie it to a movie. Make your own thing. Have fun with it. I don't understand how that hasn't happened every 5 years from
Well,
DC.
I mean, the Arkham series demonstrated just how powerful that can be.
Exactly.
Do you think we're going to see another Arkham game, or are they done?
I think Rocksteady.
They must be working on something right now. What are they working on?
100% they're working on something, yes. What they're working on, I don't know. I want a Superman game. It's not. I even when I was making the predictions, I was saying it wouldn't be that. I think they're doing DC. I wouldn't ever put it past them to be another Batman game, but I would hope it would definitely. It wouldn't. You're never gonna get from them another Bruce Wayne Batman game. I wouldn't put it past to get. You're gonna get Batman Beyond one day. You're gonna get I mean, I think they're gonna tweak it if they did that, but I think they're onto something different altogether.
Okay.
And whether it's Ninja Turtles, whether it's Suicide Squad,
Yeah,
whether
it's tricky, isn't it? Because like the Arkham movie, so the Arkham games were kind of like the Chris Nolan movies in the sense that a lot of people viewed that as like the last word. Like what? Like how on earth do you? What do you do after this?
I mean, that's for me personally where I'd be like, when they were like, we're not doing another Arkham game, I'm like, all right. What I would do is just do a Batman Beyond game. You've earned it at this point where people understand Rocksteady and they understand Rocksteady Batman games. Cool, we've given you these three things. Now we're jumping ahead 30 years, 40 years in our own mythos. Where it is, you're going to be Terry, you're going to get the Batman Beyond suit, Bruce is going to be there, it's still going to be Kevin Conroy, he's old as shit. Just do Return of the Joker or have that be one of the angles in there. That's what I would do.
But as you mentioned, Rocksteady was successful with the Arkham games by creating their own mythology, not trying to piggyback on something that was already out there, like Batman Beyond.
Yes, no. I mean, I would argue no, probably actually, right? Because you figure they started, originally, if you remember, in the first demos of Arkham Asylum, it was very much like, Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill, are you guys in the animated of this series? And they're like, well, no, but yes. Like if you, we're just telling a Batman story. If you want to bring that into it, sure, why not? Okay, great. And then you figure, even though they fucked around with it, right? Like Arkham Knight, spoilers for Arkham Knight, everybody, is just fucking, it's just Red Hood. It's just Jason Todd. When they were like, we've invented our own character in Arkham Knight, and I'm playing this game, I'm like, they show the Jason Todd flashback. I'm like, motherfucker, are you just telling the Red Hood story? And then, yeah, sure enough, the fucking Arkham Knight ears come off and he's a Red Hood. It's like, all right, guys.
And again, aren't you glad that Insomniac did their own Spider-Man and not MCU Spider-Man?
Oh my God, yes, 1,000%. I hope the Insomniac Spider-Man is at least a trilogy, if not more.
You think that could be their Arkham series?
Yes, 100%. And I really hope they get crazy with the next one. Not that they didn't get crazy with this one, but I felt like this one played it very safe in terms of like what the Spider-Man story is. Whereas I'd love to see what the Easter egg or the no spoilers. After credits teasers they do at the end of it. Like, yeah, sure. Like, I'd love to see these games and see what you're going to do with it.
What else you got?
Now we move on to what you should be reading. This is where the people on patreon.com/kindafunny tell us what they're reading, what we should be reading.
Oh, they give us recommendations.
Jericho chimes in to fight me and says, Captain America Winter Soldier Volume 1. This is 2060 citing. I didn't dislike this, which was a surprise to me. I wasn't a big Cap fan at all. I find him even boring. But now, this one puts him in another light with his mental issues, parentheses, if they really are that, or is it the cube? His love interest, his lost friends. It's something pretty good. I will continue reading this story arc. Again, the stuff that I thought was like, what are you doing? This is kind of boring, leads into this. And he talks about love interest, mental health issues. Maybe I need to keep going and see exactly where that's going. But I thought those first few issues were like, meh, not for me. Mario Miranda says standout books of the month. He has a couple in here that I'd never heard of, which are then echoed by Kayla. So I'll give them both time to read about this. Beasts of Burden, Wise Dogs, and Eldritch Men #1. I fucking love Beasts of Burden and Evan Dorkin in general. It's such a good premise and the writing is always so much fun. Dewey's art on this new series is just phenomenal and makes for a fantastic overall package. If you're not familiar, it's a Hellboy/BPRD type series dealing with the occult, but with animals being protagonists. Kayla echoes this and says, When I picked this up, my partner said, of course you would get this. It's about dogs. Yep, I am predictable. It should not be a surprise that I give any comic book with animals a chance, and I've never been disappointed. Beasts of Burden is about these magic-wielding dogs who are protecting land from some dark forces in the Pocono Mountains. These pups have really great personalities. The leader of the pack reminds me of a nicer John Constantine. The art is nice, painting-like quality that I enjoy. I personally add this to my pull list. Interesting. And then, again, in line with Mario, well, let's start with Mario because he starts with Gideon Falls number 5. He says, this is probably my favorite book that I find myself not having a clue what is happening. Lemire, along with Sorrentino's fantastic art, do a fantastic job of creating a really tense, creepy tone every issue. I wish I had a better idea of what was actually going on, as each issue only gives you a bit of the overall plot and will definitely read better in collected trades / hardcovers, but it's great enough for me to keep coming back. Kayla says Gideon Falls number 6. So this was the end of the Black Barn arc. Not anywhere closer to knowing what the hell is going on. So you're not alone, Mario. But I can't stop reading, parentheses, the old Lemire hook, line, and sinker. The art was pretty dope, or pretty top notch as always. Next issue is in October, frowny face. Kayla tosses this out. She could fly number 2. She tossed out She Could Fly number 1, right? I've only read that one. I haven't read number 2 yet. The idea here, Gary, is that we're getting a story told from this troubled young lady's perspective, and basically, in their world, suddenly there's this one woman who can fly, and every few weeks flies up, and you get like the B-roll off phones or news crews or whatever, and then on her latest attempt, she flies up and explodes.
Okay.
And so it's this girl who's tied so into this story, kind of giving her, and I'm rusty now, it's been a little over a month now, but like a reason to live kind of thing, a reason for hope kind of thing, sees this explode and then have to deal with what the hell's going on and why. And so Kayla pops in for She Could Fly number 2. I really do love this story. Mental illness is such a hard thing to capture, but Christopher Cantwell really excels at writing it because his personal experience with it. Also, the mystery of the flying woman is intriguing. Can't wait till next issue. I need to jump in there and get into number 2 for sure. Final one for the day comes from Luca Dale, talking about Action Comics and Superman. Really enjoyed Action 1000 and 1002. It's doing a great job at writing a personal side of Clark and really making Metropolis a main character in the story. Superman, on the other hand, I'm still not sold on. Rogol Zar isn't as compelling to me, and I'm not keen on how he's writing the rest of the league. I've also been chipping away at Jeff Johns' Green Lantern saga, and holy shit, did the Sinestro Corps War reel me in. Yeah, that's great. And similar to Superman stuff, I'm behind already because I said it's just been a busy month. Yeah, the way I think Bendis is doing a great job of Clark and the personal Superman stuff, but when Martian Manhunter showed up in what it would have been, I guess, Superman 1, and Martian Manhunter is basically like to Clark, hey, and maybe they're going somewhere with this, but hey, you should think about ruling the world. He not in so many words, but basically like, you have a great moral compass and you should be kind of at the front. And Clark's like, it sounds like you're saying take over, and that's not what I'm about. So I need to catch up and find out what's going on there.
I've got one more quick one to add.
Please do.
I almost brought it in instead of this, but I don't have. It was one of the. So you might have said earlier, I don't like to buy comics in their individual iterations. I like to wait for the trade. This is one of those ones that I was intrigued by the premise, so I bought issue 1, and it was one of the first. It's one of the only times I've ever then gone out and just. I'm not going to wait for the trade. I'm going to buy all the others.
Nice.
So for that reason, I don't have the trade.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would have brought it in. You might know it. It's like 2 or 3 years old at this point. I think it's one of the Bryans. It's either Bendis or Brian K. Vaughan. Okay. I want to say Brian K. Vaughan, but someone's going to prove me that I'm wrong right now. But it's called We Stand on Guard. Do you know this comic?
No, I don't know this one.
Near future.
Okay.
The United States and Canada are at war. The United States has basically invaded Canada in giant mechs.
Told you, Jen, we would.
And the story follows a group of Canadian, like, Wolverines, like a Red Dawn kind of vibe, like a guerrilla movement, fighting back against the might of the United States mechanized army. Really cool.
What's it called again?
We Stand on Guard.
Years ago, well, not years ago.
It's not that old.
Months ago.
It's a few, maybe 2 or 3 years old.
I remember sending Colin this one back in the day when it was like, hey, this sounds interesting and something that would be up your alley.
Yeah, I want to say Brian K. Vaughan, but do a quick Google right now and correct me.
We Stand on Guard.
Yeah.
It is Brian K. Vaughan.
Yeah. Really good.
All right.
Really good. It's one of those ones where I called my agent and said, can we find out what's going on here with like a movie? Because I would be interested in it. I think the plan was for Brian to do it himself, that he was going to adapt it himself.
Coward.
But it's really
Get
cool.
Gary Whitta on this thing. Come on.
Really cool. Come on. Red Dawn with giant mechs and Canadian Wolverines.
Perfect.
What more do you want?
I got to check that out. How many issues in is it now, roughly?
I might have been a limited run. It might have just been
dear.
it might have just been a quick thing.
Okay, then I'll check that one right
Yeah.
as soon as we're done. I'll open this guy and get it. Gary
What do
Whitta.
you use, Comixology to get all your stuff?
Of course I use Comixology,
Okay.
yeah. Turns out Comixology not available worldwide.
Huh.
It popped up, I guess, because I usually link out on Comixology, like, hey, if you need to read what we're going to read, click it here. And there was a whole bunch of people on Patreon this month being like, hey, just a heads up, it isn't available everywhere. And I'm like, damn, I didn't know that. Gary?
I'm sure you can get the collected one now on Comixology.
Gary.
Yes.
You're here for a brand new segment.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's number
Inaugural.
Issue 8. We're adding in this segment called "I Love This Place."
Is it about comic book stores?
It is. Mario Miranda writes in and says, I apologize if I'm over posting, but just a quick suggestion for the show. What if every issue moving forward, one of the best friends or a Patreon best friend write in a shout out of their favorite local comic shop? I'd love to hear about all the shops from all over the world. Also, it would be cool to see someone from the shop downstairs, Comic Experience, come on the show and talk about working/running the shops and the industry from their perspective.
You should have, what's her name?
Julie.
Yeah, Julie.
Number one, Mario. I totally want to get people from the Outpost up here. The problem always is that for the most part we were booked out, and then it was scramble mode. And I know Gary and I love each other and want to get into as many podcasts as possible, so I got him in here. But no, I totally want to get Julie or whoever up from the shop in here. Of course, usually what I do. Have you ever seen this on the morning show when we'll bring when we have people from on this show, the Greg's Comic Book Club, who are comic books people, I'll randomly bring them downstairs to see if they'll recognize them, and it's been 4 out of 4. I bring them like, Babs Tar, oh my God. And they run over and get books for her to sign or whatever. Same thing with Irene. And then when we had Cameron Cuff on from Krypton, we had a gimmick where I was bringing in free comics and different people kept bringing them in. And so I went down to the shop and I was like, hey, can you lock up for a second and come up and get a book signed by Cameron? He's like, yeah, sure. Came up, got the book signed, went back down. We're goons here. Mario, I love the idea of getting the comic experience up here. Of course I will, and I've had that before. However, I'd never thought about I Love This Place as a segment. I'm glad you recommended it. And then I'm glad that you're some kind of Patreon psychopath where I put on maybe an hour and a half ago, hey, this is a great idea. Why don't you do the first one, Mario? Shout out your comic shop. And you responded immediately.
Right there.
Mario is here and says, shout out to Collector's Paradise in Winnetka, California. I've been going there since I was 15 and I'm now 32. Great service and a great shop with a large selection. They have an online subscription service so you can add and delete books on your pull list online and they'll have your book for you come Wednesday. That's a great thing.
Shout out to Two Cats Comics right here in West Portal in San Francisco.
Oh yeah, is that your shop?
Well, I mean, this has kind of become Comics Experience Outpost has kind of become my local because I come here all the time.
You're here every Wednesday.
And
You're here
right
Wednesdays.
downstairs. But the closest one to me is a place called Two Cats Comics on West Portal Avenue in San Francisco. It's a little store, but they're really friendly. You know, it's one of those places where I feel like people sometimes feel intimidated about going to comic book stores. If they're not an expert, they don't want to get sneered at by the comic book store guy. These aren't comic book store guy type guys. They're really friendly and helpful, and I think that's what comic book stores need to be.
If by happenstance you've been watching for an hour and a half and you don't go to your local comic book shop all that often, I would tell you that honestly, I've never had a bad experience at a comic shop. When I go in and admit that I don't know something, what should I read? Right. Downstairs, over there, back in Graham Cracker Comics in Glen Ellen, like, they've always been awesome. They are as nerdy as you and I, and they want to talk about comics.
Seriously, they want to help you. They want to sell you stuff. They're not going to sell you stuff by sneering at you.
Yeah, 100%. Check out your local comic book shop. Pretty soon, maybe next month. I'm not looking ahead. You'll see on the Patreon post. I believe you know Isotope Comics?
Oh, yes, one of the big ones.
James is coming.
Syme, yeah.
James is coming by.
Are you going to have James?
James is coming by the show.
James is a character for sure.
Dude, James has been good to us far longer than he's ever had to. We filmed a long time ago, I think, before we left IGN, which probably was a huge conflict of interest. Game Over Greggy at the time got part of YouTube Geek Week. And we went to, I was like, hey, can we come film a comic show in your thing? And he's like, yeah, sure. And me and Colin went there with Nick and just Nick. Yeah, we went there and filmed a comic show called Horribly Wrong Comic Book Origins. And that was fucking dope. And James has been fantastic forever.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Gary Whitta.
Greg,
you've been a pleasure as always.
Thank you for having me. This is fun. I'd like to do this more often. I love talking about comic books.
Dude, I want this show to get successful enough that I have to do it every week. You know what I mean? But yeah, you have to support.
So you're
more
still
on
kind
Patreon.
of in the pilot phase here. Once a month.
No. Well, the idea right now is that it's a Patreon exclusive. We in 2018 we want to give you more reasons to be like, oh man, this is worth my $1 because that's all it costs.
So does this show ever become available to the Great Unwashed, or is it only for Patreons?
It's only for Patreons, but like I said, sometimes on Free Comic Book Day I'll kick out one and be like, hey, to celebrate, here's a random episode to get your whistle wet. But I never publish it public. It's only if you see the tweet or whatever.
Got it.
Yeah. What do you want to pimp before you go?
Well, again, based on when this episode's going out, I should pimp The Last Jedi. Number 6 is out today.
Yeah.
Go to your comic book store. It's my personal favorite of all 6.
Okay.
Each issue, I think we got to do at least one or two things that were cool. Because the climax is always the most interesting part of the story. We got to do some really cool stuff. Luke's final words. I got choked up writing them. They're really special.
Did they come to you immediately, or did you have to do many? Okay.
Yeah, and it's one of my. I've written Star Wars now. I wrote a Star Wars movie. I've written 2 seasons of Star Wars TV.
Yeah.
I wrote for a Star Wars book, and I've written now 6 issues of Star Wars comics. The line that page, Luke's final page, might be my favorite thing I've ever written for Star Wars in any medium.
Fuck, dude.
I got choked up because it's such a big moment. Luke, kind of passing on,
saying goodbye.
Yeah, saying goodbye.
Yeah.
Well, but not for long though. We probably don't think. I mean, he's back in episode 9, isn't he?
Oh, is he? I don't know.
Well, Mark Hamill's going to be in episode 9.
Force Ghost.
And I imagine he's playing. I'd be very surprised if he's playing a character other than Luke Skywalker.
It'd be him, Jar Jar, Hayden Christensen over there.
I don't know, maybe the Joker shows up. Maybe they're really going nuts.
Yeah. That's the funny thing. The other day on Twitter, and a best friend was trying to hook me up with Mark Hamill, to be on the show.
Yeah.
And then Troy Baker chimed in, and I was like, the best part will be I'll get Mark Hamill, and it will literally be 2.5 hours of Joker questions, and they'd be like, oh yeah, what's it like being Luke Skywalker? All right, anyways, we gotta go. Anyways, see you later.
He would probably appreciate that. I imagine he enjoys talking about things other than Luke Skywalker.
He tweeted the best friend tournament. You know what I mean? Like he was all about it.
Yeah.
Gary,
he's a good guy.
I agree. You're a pleasure, and I love you.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it immensely.
Until next time, Excelsior.